The Transformers movies has always been a mixed bag. You never really know what you would get from them. You can either get, some decent good films or some shockingly bad movies. So you never really know which one you're going to get out of it. Now, the last Transformers movie I watched, Rise of the Beast, was probably not really that great from my perspective. It didn't really surprise me or shock me, and it was a very, very underwhelming movie. But the last Transformers movie I enjoyed in recent years is Bumblebee, so nothing really has met that expectations. But today, I can safely say there is one movie that has met my expectations, and that movie is Transformers 1. Now, going into this movie, I went with this movie with very modest expectations. I wasn't going to be overwhelmingly positive or negative when it comes with a new Transformers movie. So I wasn't really putting my fist in the air thinking that, oh yes, a new Transformers movie, I can't wait to watch it. But so far, every mainstream critic website has been overwhelmingly positive with this movie. If you look at Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic, lots of people from the audience and the critics have been really praising this movie a lot, with very few or hardly any points of negativity at all. So this was a movie that I really think was overwhelmingly positive. And it was very surprising that for a Transformers movie, this was one. Because many Transformers movies in the past, there was always something negative or something that you could really pick out with this film. But I can finally say that all the critics and the audience were right. I actually really enjoyed this film. It's a really good film. And there are some points I would like to point out on, but they really aren't, major at all. I just think overall this is a really good Transformers movie. Now, my biggest compliment with this movie is just how amazing the animation and the visuals are. Now, I don't recall of the previous Transformers films being an anime movies. The ones I've been more used to are all live action. So I think the direction for this one to be a animated film is really, really good. I love the animation. The visuals are vivid and colorful and stunning. I think the way they get the whole atmosphere of Cybertron is really impressive. So I really think this was the biggest compliment for this film. And I think it's a good direction they took with it compared to the live action that they did for the previous films. But even despite it being a animated movie, I really also think this movie really builds up some very good action sequences as well. Now, my experience from watching this movie, I think most of the action really comes from the near middle part of the film to the end. Now, I don't feel there was much action or sequences to it more of the beginning of the film. It did kind of build up a little bit, but it wasn't really delivering as much. And that was kind of my only sort of critique I might have with this film. It's just I would have wished that they would have really expressed that a little bit more. But that's very minor point to really point out. But even still, I really think the action is very good. And even despite it being a more child-friendly film versus the live-action movies, it's actually well shot and actually well put together, and you wouldn't actually think that is a real downgrade from the previous films. But also, as a origin story for the Transformers franchise, this is actually a really good story. Now, the story mainly follows the early relationship between Optimus Prime and Megatron. Now, the original names for these characters for Optimus Prime was Orion Pax, and Megatron was D16. And the origin story that follows is that both of them are miners. And they are miners in the control of the Cybertron leader, Sential Prime. And he's meant to be the main big bad of this film. Although, personally watching this movie, I never really viewed him as a big bad person throughout the movie. So, they kind of hyped him up as this main villain. But it kind of felt that he was more or less like a corrupt leader, essentially. And he's essentially the main leader of Cybertron, and he controls all the miners and the primes that do not have the transformation cogs that makes them powerful. And he's removed all those cogs away from them, kind of enslaving them to really follow his command. And when some of the Transformers like Optimus Prime, Megatron, and the others find out that he is, that Sentinel Prime is essentially, using them as like these sort of slaves to really, help envisage his power on Cybertron and, maintain all the energy of everything as well. It's kind of goes awry and it kind of builds up that sequence. Now, it did take a while for the story to develop. That's kind of like another thing I want to point out with this movie, as well as like the action moments took a while to develop. It's also the same aspects with the story and the narrative. Now, I think the plot and the narrative is actually a good, simple premise, and it's actually an interesting premise to build up. But it did take a while to develop, mostly from the middle part of the film to the end. So that's just another few points I want to point out. But in general, I think the narrative and the story is serviceable, and I actually think it's a good one for the franchise. But also, I really need to highlight the voice acting. I actually thought the voice acting was actually very good for this film. Now, I know there's been some criticism with the voice acting before this film, which mostly involved that Peter Cullen wasn't actually going to voice Optimus Prime. Now, I personally didn't mind it too much that Chris Hemsworth was going to voice Optimus Prime. I actually think for a lot of the voice acting, including Chris Hemsworth, they do a good job with that role. Now, obviously, as I wish Peter Cullen was Optimus Prime for this film, because he is so synonymous of being that character, and that voice just works really well. So it was a little bit of a disappointment that he wasn't the voice of Optimus. But Chris Hemsworth actually does a very good job fulfilling that role. And many of the voice acting as well is actually very good. So really a lot of props to the voice acting of this film. And also the writing is also good as well. Now, parts of the writing and the dialogue does get a little bit cheesy with some comedy, and in my opinion, I just gotta be honest, it didn't land for me. But I think that's because it's mostly also targeted for children as well, and I think they will enjoy those moments. So do gotta give a lot of credit for that. But in general, this is a very good film. I really enjoyed Transformers 1. It will be very interesting to see where the direction goes after this film, because probably as of recent, this is probably now one of my favorite Transformers movie. Now, I know the box office hasn't been great for this film, but I personally would recommend people to watch this movie. Whether you're a fan of Transformers, animated movies, or even just take your children to watch this film, I really recommend it. So, overall, for me, if I had to rate Transformers 1, I'm probably going to give this movie an 8 out of 10. It's a very solid movie. It's a great film. It's not going to be like going to surprise you with great expectations that will really jaw drop you watching this movie. I think it's just a very good Transformers movie, and it's solid for what it really accomplished to do. So yeah, very good film. Let me know what you guys think of Transformers 1 if you have watched it. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, subscribe, dislike if you want to dislike. Thank you for watching, and yeah, that's about it. See you later.